The knock that changes everything. The knock wasn't polite. 3 hard hits, like whoever was on the porch had already decided this conversation was happening. I'm in the hallway in my socks. Phone clenched so tight my hand hurts. The screen is open to a genetic website, bright and chirpy, like it doesn't understand what it just did. Big letters, DNA matches. Under that, a label that makes my stomach turn. Close family. In the kitchen, my mom calls, "Who is it?" Like this is a normal night. Another knock. Then a voice through the door, calm and practiced. "Police department. Can you open up?" Your brain immediately tries to rescue you with explanations. Wrong house. Paperwork mix-up. Someone else's problem. But my body already knows they're here because of me, and because of what's glowing on the screen. Most people do DNA tests for entertainment. They want a map, a fun percentage, a distant cousin who messages, "Hey fam," and disappears. That's what I thought I was buying when I mailed a little tube of spit. What I got was a name I've never heard in my own home, listed as close family. And that's why I'm frozen between 2 doors. The front door where the police are waiting, and the invisible door behind me. The one that would open if I turned around and asked my parents a question I've never been scared to ask before. Who is this person? Here's the part that still messes with my head. I didn't call the police because I hated my parents. I called because, for one sharp minute, calling strangers felt safer than asking the 2 people who raised me. Because if that website is right, that question doesn't start a hard conversation. It starts an investigation. I know how dramatic kidnapped sounds. A month ago, I would have heard that word and pictured a stranger. Parking lot. A scream. A headline with a mugshot. Kidnapping is supposed to be obvious. It's not supposed to wear your dad's voice. It's not supposed to know your coffee order. It's not supposed to sit across from you at Thanksgiving and ask about your job. That's the nightmare version of normal. Everything looks loving, until a single fact makes all the love feel complicated. And I'm going to give you the facts. Not vibes. Not a theory. The exact clue on that genetic website that snapped my life into 2 timelines. The one I lived, and the one I was never told. And yes, I took screenshots. Because there's a moment where you realize truth can be erased. Profiles can go private. Results can update. Parent can grab your phone and swear you misread it. So I captured everything. The match, the centimorgan number, the relationship estimate. If I was about to question the people who tucked me in, I needed something colder than a feeling. Because from the outside, my family looked solid. My parents showed up. They paid bills. They grounded me for stupid stuff. They hugged me when I cried. If you met them in a grocery store, you'd never clock them as people with a secret big enough to attract a police officer to their porch. Which is why the little weird things never registered as danger. They registered as families are weird. I didn't have many baby photos. My mom got tense when people asked about my birth story. Certain questions would shut the room down fast: medical history, blood type, relatives. But you don't interrogate your parents over stuff like that. You grow up. You move on. You trust the story you were handed. Then the DNA kits got trendy. Friends were posting their results like they were taking a personality test. I figured I'd do it once, learn something, and forget about it. So I mailed the tube. Weeks passed. Life stayed normal. Until a random Thursday when my phone buzzed. "Your results are ready." I opened it half paying attention. Scrolled the regions, the charts, the little map. Interesting. Fine. Then I tapped DNA matches. And the site didn't give me a list of third cousins. It gave me one person at the top like it was introducing us. Real name. Real account. And that label again, close family. No one in my family has that name. I stared until my screen dimmed. Refreshed. Still there. I read it out loud, quietly, just to see if it would sound familiar in my own voice. Didn't. Then I saw the number underneath. Shared centimorgans. The math behind the relationship. The part the website can't accidentally guess. It even offered the likely categories: parent, child, sibling, like it was casually listing ways my entire life could be wrong. That's when memories started reordering themselves, like magnets flipping. No pregnancy photos. A rehearsed birth story. The weird intensity around medical questions. Things I'd shrugged off suddenly standing up straight. The door rattles again. My mom is closer now, towel in her hands, eyebrows pulled tight, about to reach for the lock. And I realize I'm not afraid of the police outside. I'm afraid of what happens inside this house if I say the wrong name out loud. So before I open this door, you need to know the one specific clue on that website that made calling the police feel safer than calling my own parents. A normal childhood, with one tiny glitch. Before I tell you what I saw on that screen, you have to understand how boring my life looked. Not perfect Instagram family boring. Just regular. The kind of regular that makes you feel guilty for suspecting anything. 2 parents. A small house that always smelled like laundry soap. A dog that shed everywhere. A calendar on the fridge with soccer practice and dentist appointments circled in red. If you asked me back then who I was, I would have answered with the easy stuff. My last name, my hometown, the school mascot, my mom's lasagna, my dad's terrible jokes. That's what family truth is supposed to be, right? A story you can say without thinking. No footnotes. No suspense. So when people hear kidnapped, they picture chaos. My before was the opposite. Which is why the first time something felt off, I didn't call it danger. I called it a quirk. And quirks are easy to laugh at, easy to excuse, easy to file away until you need them later like evidence in your head. My dad was the steady one. Up at 6, coffee, boots by the door, same route to work every day. He wasn't a big talker, but he showed love through logistics. Fixing the sink, topping off my gas, tightening the bolts on my bike. My mom was noise and motion. She narrated everything she did. Where are my keys? Why is this drawer haunted? And she hugged like she meant to keep you from floating away. They weren't saints. They fought about money, about my grades, about whose turn it was to pick up groceries. But they also did the usual things that make you relax. Showed up at school plays, took pictures on the first day of school, made me write thank you notes to relatives I barely knew. If you're trying to picture villains, you'd be disappointed. They looked like everyone else's parents. That's the trap. Evil is obvious in movies. In real life, it can look like a man rubbing sleep out of his eyes while he makes you pancakes and asks about school. We lived on routines. Friday nights were pizza and a movie, even if we argued for an hour about what to watch. Sundays meant church sometimes, brunch always, and my mom's rule that you couldn't stay in pajamas past noon because the day will win. We had the same neighbors for years, the same mailman, the same creaky step on the staircase that you learned to hop over. I knew where the bandages were. I knew which cabinet held the fancy plates that never got used. In that kind of home, your brain builds a quiet contract. These people are my people. This is my origin story. It doesn't occur to you that your last name might be a costume you've been wearing since you were too small to object. That thought doesn't fit anywhere, so it never shows up. And when a missing detail does appear, you treat it like a missing sock. Annoying but not alarming, because the larger picture still looks complete. At least that's what I believed up until it cracked. The first glitch was so small I'm embarrassed it took me years to notice. I was in middle school, helping my mom clean out a closet, when I found a shoebox of photos. You know the kind, faded prints, corners curled, people squinting in the sun. There were pictures of my parents as teenagers, pictures of their wedding, pictures of holidays with relatives whose names I didn't know. Then there was me, suddenly at about 3. Toddler me in a coat, toddler me with a birthday cake, toddler me on my dad's shoulders at a fair. No hospital photo, no newborn burrito picture, no first day home. I asked casually like I was asking where the scissors were. Do we have any baby pictures of me? My mom didn't even look up. We lost a bunch when we moved, she said. Simple. End of story. Except we hadn't moved that many times. And you don't lose every photo from the first 2 years and keep the wedding album. But I filed it under quirk. Missing socks. The second glitch was my birth story. Most people have a version they've heard 1,000 times. Your heart rate dropped. It was snowing. Your dad fainted. It becomes family folklore. Mine was short. If I asked, my mom would say, long labor, healthy baby, and then pivot to something else. My dad would joke, You were late and stubborn, same as now. And that was it. No doctor's name. No hospital. No details that stick. One time in high school health class, we had to fill out a worksheet about family medical history and birth complications. I came home and asked my mom what hospital I was born at. She froze for half a second, just enough for me to notice, and then said a hospital name in our city. I remember because it sounded too quick, like she'd already practiced it. I wrote it down. I never checked it. Who checks? It's your mother. You trust the script she hands you. The problem is, scripts exist for a reason, especially when the truth is inconvenient. Then there were the relatives, or more accurately, the lack of them. I had 2 sets of grandparents on paper, but they were more like characters than people. We didn't visit much. There were no family reunions, no cousins, no aunt who kissed your cheek too hard. My mom would say, "We're not close with them," like it was a personality mismatch. My dad would get quiet when their names came up, like the topic cost him something. When friends talked about seeing their grandparents every weekend, I shrugged and acted like I didn't care. But it did leave a hole. At school, "Where's your family from?" is a normal small talk question. Most people answer without thinking. I learned to answer with geography instead of people. "Oh, we're from around here." If someone pushed, "No, originally," I'd say, "I'm not sure," and laugh it off. I didn't realize how weird, "I'm not sure," is when you're talking about yourself. It didn't feel like a secret. It felt like a blank page everyone else had filled in. The weirdest part was paperwork. Doctors love paperwork. Schools love paperwork. Anywhere you go as a kid, someone hands your parents a form and asks, "Any allergies? Any family history? Any conditions we should know about?" My parents were vague. Not negligent. Not refusing. Just vague in a way that made the adults stop asking. Nothing major. Not that we know of. Probably the usual stuff. I remember sitting in a clinic once, waiting for stitches after I did something dumb, and the nurse asked for my blood type. My mom said, "Oh, positive," without blinking. The nurse nodded and wrote it down. Later in the car I asked, "How do you know my blood type?" My mom laughed and said, "Mothers know everything." It was meant to be comforting, like magic, and I accepted it like a kid accepts magic. But magic isn't real. Information comes from somewhere. When you don't know where it comes from, that's not magic. That's a missing link. And missing links are fine until you start tugging on them. Here's what I want you to notice. None of those things are proof of anything. Missing photos happen. Families drift apart. Parents hate oversharing. If you're watching this thinking, "I would have caught it," maybe, but when you're inside it, you don't treat your childhood like a crime scene. You treat it like your life. And more than that, you protect it. I was loyal. I defended my parents when people made jokes about them being strict. I rolled my eyes when friends called their moms toxic. I thought, at least mine care. That's the emotional glue that keeps you from pulling threads. Because if you pull too hard and something unravels, you're not just losing a secret. You're losing your foundation. So I made myself small around the questions that made my parents tense. I learned which topics killed the mood. I became good at changing the subject. And that skill, keeping things light, keeping things normal, worked. Until technology showed up and didn't care about anyone's mood. Technology doesn't flinch. It just returns results to you. The DNA test idea didn't start with suspicion. It started with boredom and a health scare. A coworker was raving about her results like it was a horoscope that also knew science. It tells you Ancestry, it flags risks, it even found me a cousin. People were laughing, comparing percentages, making plans to message strangers. It looked harmless, almost responsible. I'd never had a clear family medical history to hand doctors, and I figured, fine, maybe this fills in gaps. So I ordered a kit late one night, clicked through the promises, and forgot about it. When it arrived, it was packaged like a toothbrush. Simple, idiot-proof. Spit, seal, mail. That's it. No warning that matches could mean immediate family. No warning that the truth might not care how much you love the people in your house. I did it between errands, dropped it in the mailbox, and went back to life like I'd signed up for trivia. Weeks passed. Nothing changed. And that's what made the moment the email arrived feel so impossible. While the lab did whatever labs do, I forgot about the kit. The waiting is long enough that you stop thinking about it, which is probably why it hits so hard when the results land. Life stayed normal. I worked. I paid bills. I visited my parents on weekends. My mom packed leftovers like I was moving out every Sunday. My dad inspected my car, my smoke alarm, my tires, anything he could fix with a screwdriver and stubbornness. That's the part that makes this story uncomfortable. My home didn't feel dangerous. It felt dependable. And the little glitches? They kept behaving like little glitches. A weird pause when I asked about relatives. A missing photo that I noticed and then forgot. A medical form filled out too fast. None of it screamed crime. It whispered family stuff. Most people imagine secrets as explosions. In real life, some secrets survive because they're quiet. They don't demand your attention. They train you to look away. I didn't know I'd been trained until the day the email arrived. If you've never had your identity questioned, you assume the truth announces itself. You think, if something was wrong, I'd know. My parents would act suspicious. The house would feel different. But truth doesn't always arrive with a confession. Sometimes it hides under love. Under a dad who remembers what you like and a mom who texts "drive safe" when you leave. In my head, family truth came in two flavors. Either everything was exactly what it looked like, or one day someone would sit me down and tell me the big secret. I didn't have a category for "you'll trip over it" online, so I couldn't recognize the signs even when they brushed past me. My parents would say, "We chose you," and I thought it was sweet. "You're ours." And I heard comfort. I didn't hear the other meaning those words can carry. That's why the start of this story isn't a dramatic confrontation. It's an email. Your results are ready. One click. And suddenly your life is up for review for me. The email came on an ordinary afternoon. I was multitasking, thinking about dinner, when my phone buzzed. Subject line: your DNA results are ready. I felt a quick thrill. I tapped it, signed in, and the site loaded with colors and prompts. It wanted me to start with the fun stuff. The map, the percentages, the explanations that make you feel like you learned something. I did, for about 30 seconds. Then I hit the tab that said DNA matches. One click, one list, and the top entry made my brain stall. Not a distant cousin. Not a maybe. A close family label, paired with a name I'd never heard in my house. Under it, a shared DNA number so high it felt like a typo. I stared, then refreshed, waiting for the glitch to correct itself. Didn't. That's the moment my normal childhood stopped being my evidence and started being my alibi. When the results hit my inbox, what was the first detail that didn't just surprise me, but didn't make sense at all? The results don't match my life. The page finished loading, and my thumb hovered like it was about to press a detonator on my own history. At the top was a stranger's name, tagged close family, and the site acted like this was normal news today. Below it sat a number in shared centimorgans, huge enough that even I knew it meant immediate blood family too. I searched the list for my mom's name, my dad's name, any cousin, any aunt, anyone, and found nothing there. In one click, I had proof I belonged to somebody, but the somebody wasn't the people in my phone contacts. I refreshed the page 3 times, because denial is basically a button you keep pressing until it works again today. Maybe I typed my password wrong. Maybe I opened someone else's account. Maybe the site was glitching in real time. I logged out, logged in, checked the email on the profile, and it was mine, painfully mine, not theirs ever. Then I stared at the little relationship estimate, and the words parent or child sat there like loaded dice too. If that label was even close to right, my entire family tree wasn't bent. It was replaced overnight by strangers. I clicked ethnicity next, expecting something cute, but the map looked like it belonged to somebody else's passport entirely too. It wasn't a little different. It was different enough that my brain tried to bargain with arithmetic for hours straight. My parents are pale, freckled, loud Irish, and this report pointed hard in directions that didn't match them at all. I zoomed in, read the fine print, and the site calmly explained that these percentages came straight from my DNA. No asterisk said results may ruin your life, and that's when my chest started doing that tight thing for real. I opened the match profile, and the first thing I noticed was the account had a family tree attached publicly. Not a huge tree, just a few names, but one was marked mother, and my own mother's name wasn't it. I clicked shared matches, the feature that shows people you both match, and the list filled with strangers fast too. No one had my last name, no one had my dad's hometown, and no one looked like a familiar branch. That's when the fun fantasy died, because errors don't create whole populations of relatives who agree with each other perfectly. I googled centimorgans like my life depended on it, because suddenly the internet felt more honest than home tonight anyway. Charts popped up, and every chart landed in the same brutal neighborhood. Parent, full sibling, or child nothing else close. I don't have kids, and I've never met a secret sibling, which left one option I couldn't breathe around yet. People think identity is a feeling, but genetics is math, and math doesn't care if you're shocked or sobbing alone. I kept waiting for a simpler explanation to show up, like a pop-up saying, "Sorry, we messed up here." So I did the responsible thing and contacted customer support, hoping a bored technician would save my sanity right away. I typed, "I think my results are wrong," and it felt like betrayal, like I was accusing my blood today. Their reply came with polite language and zero comfort. Your sample was processed correctly, and matches reflect shared DNA only. They offered the nuclear option, a retest kit, but also warned that retests rarely change close family matches much ever. In other words, the system wasn't confused. And I couldn't blame an algorithm for telling the truth back. I downloaded the raw data file, a giant string of letters and numbers, thinking I could catch a mistake myself. It was like opening the hood of a car when you don't know engines. It only proves the car exists. Still, I scrolled through it at midnight because sleep felt irresponsible when my identity was on the line like this. I took screenshots of everything: the match name, the centimorgans, the date stamped on the results, the relationship guessed too. If I was about to question reality, I wanted receipts that could outlive deleted accounts and convenient amnesia later on. Then I started a note on my phone titled Theories, because my mind needed boxes to put terror into somewhere. First box. Adoption, the gentlest explanation, the one people post about with hugs and grateful captions online all the time. Second box. An affair, because the DNA number could mean my dad wasn't my dad, or my mom wasn't either. Third box. Donor conception, the modern secret, where everyone thinks it's no big deal until it's your face in question. Fourth box, the one I didn't want to write. Switched at birth or stolen or something that ends in handcuffs. I tried to make adoption fit first because adoption at least has paperwork, social workers, a story adults tell kids. But if I was adopted, why would my parents dodge basic questions like a hospital name, a blood type, grandparents? Adoptive parents usually know those details, or they at least admit they don't, instead of acting allergic to them always. Also, the website didn't label my match as distant. It shouted close enough to be in my immediate family circle. A closed adoption can hide names, but it can't hide DNA, and this DNA was waving directly at someone specific. So I moved to the affair theory because it's ugly but common, and it explains why adults lie so well. I imagined my mom meeting someone else, or my dad, and building a secret they buried under normal routines daily. But the match wasn't a stranger with a messy timeline. The match was close enough to rewrite who gave birth. An affair might change a father, not usually a mother, unless the entire pregnancy story itself was fake too then. That thought made me nauseous, because my mom's hugs suddenly had a shadow, and I hated myself for noticing it. Donor conception sounded cleaner, like a medical decision, but it still didn't explain why my parents acted cornered before now. If I was donor conceived, there would be records, a clinic name, at least one conversation saying, "We chose help." My parents never hinted at that, not even in arguments, not even during serious talks, which is when secrets slip. And the match profile had an actual person with photos and a tree, not a faceless donor code number either. Every theory that felt socially acceptable kept breaking, and the only theories left were the ones that feel illegal now. I went back to the match list and looked for patterns, like a detective who didn't ask to become one. There were second and third matches, not as close as the first, but close enough to form a cluster too. Clusters matter because one weird match could be a glitch, but a whole cluster means a whole hidden family network. When I clicked their trees, the same surnames repeated, the same towns appeared, like my DNA was pointing a finger. The finger wasn't pointing at my parents. It was pointing somewhere else entirely, somewhere I'd never been invited into before. That's when switched at birth crawled back into my head, because hospitals have mistakes, and mistakes have victims sometimes too. I looked up news stories and they all start the same way. A test, a match, a family falling apart. But those stories also end with obvious paperwork and lawsuits. Not police, not missing persons posters, not fear yet here. Stolen was the last word I let myself think, because once you think it, you can't unthink it ever again. And the problem with that word is it turns your parents from complicated people into possible suspects overnight to you. I told myself I would not contact the match, because contacting them would make this real in a new way. Then I imagined them looking at their own list and wondering who I was, and curiosity beat fear that night. I drafted a message 10 times, deleting anything personal, because oversharing felt dangerous and silence felt worse to my mind. I finally wrote, "Hi, the site says we're close family, and I'm trying to understand how that's possible here today." I hit send, and the tiny whoosh sound felt like dropping a stone into a well I couldn't see bottom. Waiting for a reply was its own torture, because every notification could be the answer or a scam or nothing. I checked my inbox like a gambler checks a slot machine, telling myself the next pull would fix everything somehow. Meanwhile, I kept clicking their profile, noticing details. Age range, location, and a photo that smiled back at me quietly. That smile bothered me because they looked normal, like a person with a job, not a villain hiding a secret. If my parents had lied, it wasn't to protect me from monsters. It was to protect themselves from consequences too. The reply came the next morning, and it didn't start with hello, it started with a question that cut deep. They wrote, "What is your birthday and what city were you born in?" And my throat went dry instantly then. No one asks that unless they already have a reason, unless they're holding a missing piece that matches your shape. I answered cautiously, just the month and year at first, because I still wanted this to be a misunderstanding bad. They responded with 3 words that made me sit down on the floor. "Oh my God. It's you right now." I tried to stay logical, asked how they knew me, and they replied with a paragraph I couldn't blink through. They had been on the site for years, searching for a close relative who vanished from their family without explanation. They described a baby born in the same month as me, in the same region with the same uncommon birthmark. I have that birthmark, a tiny mark near my ribs, something my mom always called a cute little coin spot. Suddenly, the match wasn't just a number. It was a person holding details that should have been impossible to guess. I asked who the mother name belonged to, and they typed it out and I didn't recognize it at all. Then they sent a photo, old and slightly blurry, of a woman smiling beside a hospital bassinet from years ago. The baby in the bassinet had my exact nose, that same little tilt, and I felt the room shift sideways. I compared it to my own childhood pictures, the ones that start at age 3, and the resemblance was loud. People say DNA is cold, but in that second it was intimate, like being recognized by someone you never met. I asked for one more detail, something only family knows, and they gave a date that matched my paperwork exactly. It was the date my birth certificate says I was born, the same date my parents celebrate every year too. They asked if I knew my original last name, and my stomach dropped, because I didn't know I had one. I typed back, "I've only ever had this name," and they replied, "That's what we were afraid of most days." We were no longer talking about genealogy, we were talking about identity theft with a family smile on top too. I went hunting for my birth certificate like it was buried treasure, and I realized I'd never seen the original. I had a photocopy from school registration, creased and faded, and suddenly even that looked like a prop to me. The copy listed my parents as parents, but the hospital name was the one my mom blurted out that day. I looked up the hospital, called records, and got a polite refusal because I didn't have the right authorization forms. That refusal wasn't proof, but it was pressure, because now the truth lived behind locked doors and signatures everywhere suddenly. I went back through my childhood memories, not for warmth, but for inconsistencies, the way you rewatch a scene slowly. My mom's face about relatives, my dad's jokes about hospitals, the way both of them changed subjects instantly every time. I remembered being told we moved a lot, but when I mapped the addresses, the timeline didn't add up cleanly. I remembered my mom warning about strangers online, which is ironic when a stranger online might actually be family now. The more I replayed things, the less innocent the glitches felt, like they were placed there on purpose by someone. Another close match appeared 2 days later, and that's when I stopped hoping this would disappear with time alone ever. This second person had a different last name, but the shared matches overlapped heavily, like 3 dots forming a triangle. And inside that triangle was me, a point connecting families that never should have met in the first place today. I messaged the second match with the same cautious opener, and they replied with confusion, then recognition too quick again. 2 strangers, independently, were reacting like I was the missing piece in a story they've lived for years already here. They asked for details I didn't want to give, so I set rules. No address and no full name yet. Even with boundaries, they sent me names, dates, and a family group photo, pointing to a woman I resembled strongly. In the photo, the woman's smile curved exactly like mine, and her eyes had the same tired shape too always. My parents always told me I had my mom's eyes, but suddenly I had a new question. Which mom exactly? That's the cruelest part of DNA tests. They don't just add information, they subtract certainty you used to live on. I asked why they'd been searching, and they said their family had a case file, not just a rumor anymore. Those 2 words, case file, changed the temperature because family secrets don't come with file numbers and timelines like that. They told me, carefully, a baby was taken during a chaotic stretch years ago, and the story never resolved fully. I asked if police were involved, and they said yes, long ago, but families get tired and cases go quiet. My hands started shaking, because I wasn't reading about crime anymore. I was sitting inside the aftershock of it now. I wanted to slam my laptop shut and pretend this was just dramatic internet nonsense. But the matches kept existing. I looked at my parents' texts, little hearts and check-ins, and for the first time they read like camouflage. Every normal memory now had a second version running underneath it, like subtitles in a language I never learned before. I kept asking, what kind of people raise you, love you, and still keep your real name hidden from you? And the scariest thought was simple. If they could hide this, what else could they hide when pressured by truth? In my note titled Theories, every option collapsed until only one remained, and it wasn't a family talk. It was a secret that comes with reports, not apologies, and it turns your house into evidence fast. I kept rereading the centimorgan number, because numbers don't flinch, and this one kept screaming close family again. If I confronted my parents too soon, they could rewrite the story, so I had to choose my move. If I'm not who my parents say I am, then who am I, and why would someone hide it hard? Escalation. From suspicion to proof, and the moment the police get involved. After that message, I didn't storm into my parents' house screaming. I didn't throw screenshots on the table. I did what most people do when the truth is radioactive. I tried to touch it with oven mitts. I told myself there had to be a normal explanation, one I could hear from their mouths without shattering everything. Adoption. A clerical mistake. A story they were scared to tell, but still legal. So I chose the safe route. I went over for dinner like nothing was wrong, and I started asking questions that sounded harmless. Hey, I said, trying to keep it light. What hospital was I born at again? I can never remember. My mom didn't answer right away. It was a tiny pause, but it hit my nervous system like a siren. She named the same hospital as before, too fast, and then she started talking about traffic, as if my question had been a pothole she swerved around. My dad stared at the TV. Volume up. Eyes locked. The message was clear. Don't make this a topic. Most people think secrets collapse under interrogation. The reality is they collapse under casual conversation, because casual conversation catches you without your armor. That's why I kept it casual. I asked about baby photos. We really should scan those, I said. It'd be fun. My mom laughed. Too loud. We don't have many, she said, like she'd rehearsed the sentence in a mirror. You know that. I know. It's just weird there's none of me as a newborn. Her smile didn't move. Some people aren't sentimental. And then she changed the subject again. Not smoothly, abruptly, like slamming a drawer. I watched her hands as she talked. They were busy, wiping counters that were already clean, folding a dish towel into a smaller and smaller square. Little movements you make when your mind is trying to outrun itself. That night, I went home and made a list of every question I'd ever been punished for asking without realizing it. Because suddenly my childhood felt like a room with a rug covering something underneath. The next time I visited, I tried a different angle. I brought up medical stuff. Did Grandpa have heart problems? I asked. The doctor keeps asking me family history. My dad's jaw tightened. Why are you digging into that now? That was the first time either of them said the quiet part out loud. Not, why do you need it? But, why are you digging? Like I was excavating. My mom swooped in with comfort like a net. Honey, don't stress yourself, she said. You're healthy. Stop reading things online. I almost laughed. The irony of being warned about online strangers by the people whose story might not survive an internet login. I nodded. I smiled. I played along. And then I did the opposite of what they wanted. I started verifying things that weren't supposed to need verifying. First, paperwork. Every family has a junk drawer for documents. Ours had always been my mom's territory. When I was a kid, if I needed my social security card, she'd pull it out like a magician. I'd never watched the trick. So one weekend, when they were both outside, I opened the file box in the closet. It wasn't locked. That should have comforted me. Didn't. Because people don't lock things they know no one will question. I found tax forms, insurance, old-school report cards. Then I found my birth certificate. Not the crisp original you see in movies. A later certified copy, issued years after my birth. I stared at the issue date. Why would a parent request a new copy years later unless the original was missing, or wrong, or needed to be replaced? I looked for hospital details. There was a hospital name, but it was printed, not handwritten. There was a county seal. It looked official. And yet, something about it felt like a costume. I took a photo of the certificate, then another closer on the registrar's signature. I felt disgusting, like I was stealing from my own family. But then I remembered. If I was right, my entire life might be stolen. I kept digging. In the same box, tucked under old insurance cards, was a folder labeled Moving. Inside were utility bills and lease papers from before I remembered living anywhere. On one lease, I saw my dad's name, but the last name was spelled differently. One letter off. People make typos. Sure. But it was the same typo on two different documents. And beside it, my mom's first name was paired with a different middle name than the one on her driver's license. My throat went dry. This wasn't just a missing photo problem. This was identity paperwork, the kind that gets you into schools and doctors and banks. I snapped photos of those too, then put everything back exactly as I found it because I wasn't ready for an explosion. I was still collecting fuel. That night, I called the number on the genetic matches profile, not directly, just through the site messaging, and asked if they could tell me more about the case file they'd mentioned. I expected hesitation. Instead, they replied like someone who'd been waiting for me to ask for years. They gave me a name I recognized from the family tree, a woman listed as my possible biological mother. They also gave me something worse, an old police report number and the department that took it. Seeing a report number is different from hearing a story. Stories can be exaggerated. Report numbers are concrete. They live in databases. They imply someone once stood in a station and said, "My baby is missing," and an officer typed it into a system. I sat in my car and Googled the department. I didn't call right away. I read old news instead. I searched the report number, the mother's name, the town, and there, buried in an archive, was a local paper headline from the year I was born. Infant taken from hospital. Mother pleads for information. My hands went numb. I clicked it, and the article loaded like it was just another piece of history. It described a baby girl. Same month. Same region. A tiny birthmark near the ribs, mentioned as an identifying feature. I went deeper, the way you do when you're hoping the next click will prove you're overreacting. I searched my own birthday with the word abducted. I checked old message boards, then a missing children database, expecting nothing. Instead, I found an age-progressed sketch from years later, a face that looked like a rough draft of mine. The caption used the same birthmark detail. The case status read unsolved. I stared at the hotline number beneath it for a full minute, because that number wasn't for entertainment. It was for strangers who might actually be me, and my parents had never mentioned it once. I had to stand up because my body suddenly couldn't stay seated. That birthmark wasn't cute. It was a label. For the first time, I understood why the DNA match's message sounded like recognition, not curiosity. They weren't finding family. They were finding evidence. I still didn't want to believe my parents were criminals. So I tried one more safe test. A trap that would only snap if the truth was heavy. At dinner the next week, I tossed a joke into the air. You know what's funny? Those DNA kits are everywhere. We should all do one, see what we get. My mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. My dad didn't even pretend to be casual. No, he said, just that. No laugh. No curiosity. No why. The kind of no that's not an opinion. Command. I smiled like it didn't matter. Why not? It's just for fun. My dad's eyes finally met mine, and there was a flash of something I'd never seen there before. Fear. Not for me. For himself. Because those companies sell your information, he said, voice sharp. Because it's a scam. Because you don't need it. My mom jumped in too fast. Yeah, those things are creepy. Don't you have enough on your plate? Enough on my plate. Like my identity was leftovers I should stop picking at. I nodded again. Played obedient. But inside, the logic tightened. Innocent people don't panic at a joke. They roll their eyes. They say no thanks. They don't shut a room down. On the drive home, my mom called me twice. My mom doesn't call twice unless someone died. When I answered, she started with sweetness, then drifted into guilt. You've been distant, she said. Did we do something? Are you mad at us? That's the part that messes with you. They don't come at you with threats. They come at you with love, because love is leverage. I told her work was busy. I said I was tired. I lied with the same ease they'd apparently been using on me. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and realized I was negotiating with the people who might have rewritten my birth. That's when family drama officially died in my head. Because if this was what I suspected, confronting them would be like warning a suspect before you secure evidence. So I started building my own case quietly. I printed the article. I saved the screenshots to multiple places. I wrote down dates, names, the report number. I forwarded the DNA match messages to an email account my parents didn't know existed. Paranoid? Maybe. But paranoia is just another word for pattern recognition when the stakes are you. I also started acting normal on purpose. I sent my mom a meme. I replied to my dad's text about oil changes. Because the more normal I seemed, the less likely they were to bolt. Meanwhile, I asked the genetic match for one more thing. Did they still have contact with any detective or advocate involved? They didn't. The case had gone cold. But they told me something that made my skin crawl. Every few years, someone would claim they'd seen the baby, and the family would chase it and then it would disappear. Always just out of reach. They told me, if you're real, you're the first solid lead in decades. That sentence put a weight on my shoulders I didn't ask for. I wasn't just unraveling my own story. I was walking into someone else's grief, and maybe someone else's crime. I talked to a friend who works in healthcare and asked, hypothetically, how hard it is to falsify birth records. They went quiet, then said, hard, but not impossible. Depends on the era, the state, and who's willing to sign. I called another friend, a lawyer, and framed it as a hypothetical too. They asked the only sane question, are you safe? Safe. I had never considered that my parents might be dangerous. Not physically, but desperate people do desperate things when the walls close in. That night, I started locking my bedroom door at their house. Yes, I was still staying there sometimes. Rent is expensive, and until recently, my parents' guest room felt like comfort. Now it felt like a set. I kept my phone charged. I kept my car keys in my pocket. I stopped drinking anything they handed me unopened. It sounds dramatic. It also sounds like the kind of habits you develop when your instincts stop trusting the room. The tipping point came on a Sunday afternoon, in the most mundane way possible. My mom asked to see my phone. Let me see those pictures you took at the park, she said, casual, reaching her hand out. Normally, I'd toss it to her without thinking. That day, my whole body said no. because my phone held the match messages, the screenshots, the article, and the word kidnapped in my search history. I laughed. Too bright. They're not good. I'll send them later. Her hand stayed out longer than it needed to. Just give it here. My dad looked up from his chair, and he didn't say anything, but his eyes narrowed like he'd been waiting for this moment. I said, I'll send them, Mom. Her voice dropped. Why are you acting weird? There it was again. Not denial. Not confusion. Accusation. As if my caution was the problem, not the reason for it. I walked to the bathroom with my phone and locked the door. I heard her whispering to my dad through the wall. Hissing. Fast, the kind of conversation you have when you think you're alone. When I came out, they were smiling. Both of them. Like nothing happened. That's when the house stopped feeling like home. Because in a home, tension breaks. Someone snaps. Someone apologizes. Here, tension disappeared on command, replaced by performance. That night, I sat in my car in a grocery store parking lot and called the department listed on the old report. I didn't start with accusations. I started with facts. I have DNA results indicating close relation to a family connected to this case. I have screenshots. I have the report number. I'm willing to meet. The dispatcher transferred me to an investigator on call. My voice shook so hard I could barely spell my own last name. The investigator listened, asked for the report number, asked for my birth date, and then got very quiet. Quiet can mean a lot of things. In that moment, it meant the system recognized the number. They asked me where I was. They asked if I was alone. They asked if the people who raised me knew I was calling. I lied and said no. Then they said words that made the decision for me. Do not confront them. If your suspicion is correct, we need to approach this carefully. Approach them. Not talk to them. Approach them. The investigator told me to email the screenshots and the messages, and to make sure I had somewhere safe to be. They also asked a question that made my skin go cold. Do you have any reason to believe they might leave town? I thought about my dad's sudden panic at the DNA joke. I thought about my mom's hand reaching for my phone. I thought about the folder labeled moving. And I realized, if they felt exposed, they could disappear overnight, and I'd be left holding questions forever. So I did the hardest thing I've ever done. I went back to their house and acted normal while I waited for the police to decide their move. I sat at the table. I laughed at my dad's joke. I ate my mom's food. I felt like I was wearing my own face as a disguise. Every minute was an open loop. Would they notice I changed? Would they check my room? Would they grab my laptop? Would they ask to see my phone again? I slept with my shoes near the bed. In the morning, the investigator called and said local officers would come by to speak with me first, and then they'd decide how to proceed. They asked me to be at the house, but to keep my distance from my parents if possible. So I waited in the hallway, phone in my hand, screen open on the match, like a talisman. My mom was in the kitchen, humming, wiping a plate, acting like this was just another Tuesday. My dad was in the living room flipping channels. The normal timeline was still running. Then the knock hit the door. 3 hard knocks. My mom called, "Who is it?" And I couldn't answer, because I didn't know if the police were here to rescue me, question me, arrest them, or introduce me to someone I was supposed to know by blood. The voice came again, "Police department. Can you open up?" And right then I understood the price of truth. Once you open it, you don't get to choose who walks in. When the door opens, who are the police here for me? My parents or someone I've never met? What happens after the door opens? When I pulled the door open, there were 2 officers on the porch and a third standing back, hand near his radio. Not aggressive, not friendly, just focused. One of them asked for my name, then asked quietly if I was the person who called about an identity issue tied to an old missing infant report. My mom stepped in beside me and did the classic parent move, half laughing, half offended. "What is this about?" My dad's voice went flat. "There's no problem here." The officer didn't argue. He just said, "We need to speak with you alone for a few minutes." And right there, the normal script cracked. My mom tried to follow us into the living room. The officer raised a hand and repeated it. "Alone." No one yelled, but the whole house changed temperature. They sat me at the kitchen table like it was a medical appointment, not my life. One officer asked simple questions first. Full legal name, date of birth, where I believed I was born. Then the questions turned sharper. Who had my birth certificate? Whether I'd ever seen the original. Whether my parents had ever mentioned adoption. I slid my phone across the table and opened the screenshots. The centimorgan number. The close family label. The messages from the match. The report number. The officer didn't react like someone seeing gossip. He reacted like someone seeing a missing piece click into a case. He asked me to email everything right then to a secure address. My hands shook so badly I mistyped it twice. And behind us, in the living room, my parents were whispering in that tight, angry way people whisper when they think volume is the only thing keeping them safe. The officers didn't put anyone in handcuffs on my front porch. Real life doesn't always give you that clean movie moment. What they did do was separate the conversations. They asked my parents to sit in a different room. They asked me if I felt safe staying there tonight. Safe. That word landed like a brick. Because if you'd asked me a month earlier, I would have said, of course. That's my home. Now I was staring at my mom's face and trying to decide if her love had always come with an expiration date. I told them I could go to a friend's place. The officer nodded like he'd already assumed that would be the answer. Then came the part that made it real in a way DNA couldn't. The officer asked if I'd consent to provide my own DNA sample for law enforcement comparison. Not a website, not an algorithm, an official chain of custody. I said yes immediately because at that point I didn't want comfort, I wanted certainty. They gave me a kit, explained the process, and I signed paperwork with a pen that kept slipping in my sweaty fingers. When I finished, one officer looked me in the eye and said, "You did the right thing by calling. Do not try to handle this alone." That sentence didn't feel like praise. Felt like a warning. While I packed a bag, my mom kept trying to pull me back into the old roles. "This is ridiculous," she said, voice sweet but sharp underneath. "You're letting the internet poison you." My dad stayed quiet, then snapped, "You have no idea what you're doing." That was the closest thing to honesty I'd heard in weeks. Because he was right. I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew what I was seeing. When I walked past them with my overnight bag, my mom started crying like I'd broken her heart on purpose. And my body did the sick thing where it still wanted to comfort her, even though my brain was screaming, "Don't." That first night away, I didn't feel relieved. I felt hollow. People think answers bring peace. Sometimes answers just bring new questions with sharper edges. I stared at the ceiling and ran through every memory I'd ever called family, trying to figure out which parts were real and which parts were stage dressing. I was furious, then guilty for being furious. I missed my parents, then hated myself for missing them. That's the part nobody warns you about. Your feelings don't update as fast as the facts do. Love doesn't turn off like a switch. It argues with reality. Loudly. A few days later, an investigator called and confirmed they were reopening parts of the old case based on new information. They couldn't tell me everything. They did tell me enough to make my hands go cold again. The family connected to my match had never stopped looking. The DNA results were the strongest lead they'd had in years. And now there were procedures, interviews, records, requests, people in offices pulling dusty boxes because of my single login. I asked the question that burned. What happens to my parents? The investigator didn't promise anything. He said, "We follow evidence." It was the first time someone said it like that, without emotion, and I realized emotion had been the glue holding my old life together. If you're watching this and you're thinking about taking a DNA test, or you already took one and something feels off, here's what I wish someone had told me before I tried to talk it out at dinner. First, preserve what you see. Screenshot everything. The match names, the centimorgan numbers, the relationship estimates, message threads, dates. Save it in more than one place. Email it to yourself. Put it in cloud storage. Print it. People can delete accounts. Sites can change interfaces. And once you confront someone, evidence has a way of disappearing. Second, don't confront alone, and don't confront early. I know the urge. Your chest wants relief. You want to hear them admit it so you can stop spinning. But confrontation gives someone time to build a story, destroy documents, and control the narrative. If there's any chance a crime happened, treat your safety like it matters more than your curiosity, because it does. Third, build a safety plan like you're being dramatic, because that's how you stay alive if you're not. Have somewhere to go. Have a charged phone. Keep your keys. Tell one trusted person what's happening. If you live with the people you're questioning, don't telegraph your moves. Being nice and being safe are not the same thing. Fourth, get professional help that matches the problem. That might mean law enforcement. It might mean an attorney who understands identity issues. It might mean a therapist who's dealt with adoptee trauma, family estrangement, or sudden identity shock. This isn't just stress. It's an earthquake, and you don't rebuild after an earthquake by telling yourself to calm down. Fifth, protect your identity on paper. If there's even a chance your documents were created under false pretenses, start thinking like someone who has to rebuild their legal self. Ask about your birth certificate, social security record, medical history. Consider a credit freeze. Not because you want revenge, but because you want control. When your origin story is in question, control becomes oxygen. Sixth, be careful with new relatives. The people on the other side of your DNA might be kind, patient, and genuine. Or they might be overwhelmed, angry, or messy. Take it slow. Set boundaries. Verify information. It's okay to want connection and still protect yourself. And if you do meet them, don't expect a movie reunion. Sometimes it's beautiful. Sometimes it's just quiet people staring at each other, trying to recognize a life they missed. As for me, the biggest change wasn't the investigation. It was the language in my head. For weeks, I kept calling them my parents out of habit, and every time I did, it felt like stepping on a loose stair. Because yes, they raised me. Yes, they loved me in ways that felt real. But love doesn't erase harm, and time doesn't legalize a lie. Eventually, I stopped using the word that made my stomach twist. I started saying their first names when I talked about them to other people. Not to be cruel, to be accurate. And when I spoke to the investigator, I used the phrase that finally fit. The people who raised me. That's the ending people want, right? A clean label. A villain. A hero. Closure. What I got was something messier. The truth plus the responsibility of what to do with it. The police weren't at my door to give me a new life in a neat box. They were there because one small DNA match forced the world to look at my family and ask, out loud, what I'd been too loyal to ask. After everything I learned, what did I decide to call them? My parents or something else entirely?